The Iranian regime had been waiting for the final blow from the sky for years. They thought the threat would always come from beyond their borders, from enemy jets, but they were wrong. The apocalypse did not come to Tehran from the air. It rose from its own asphalt, its own ports, and its own oil valves. What you are witnessing is not just a wave of protest or civil unrest. It is the most organized, destructive, and deadly logistical suicide operation in modern history. In the south, giant cranes have stopped dead at the port of Bandar Abbas. This is the key point of the Persian Gulf, where ships are trapped in open waters. In the west, at the heart of the regime, oil workers shut down the valves. These valves were the country's only source of cash, and now they are dry. On highways stretching north to south, millions of drivers simply turned off their engines. They have effectively unplugged the life support system of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Trade with China has collapsed, and the connection with Russia has been completely severed. The 6 million angry workers on the streets are not just protesting the regime, they are economically strangling it, suffocating it, and wiping it out without bullets. How did Iran's resistance economy turn into a crumbling wreck within a few weeks? The big explosion that ended the regime began on December 28, 2025. It started in the heart of Tehran, at the historic and vital Grand Bazaar. The currency lost 80% of its value, and inflation exceeded 70% in 1 year. For merchants, closing shop was no longer about profit but a matter of survival. This market panic signaled the total collapse of the regime's economic defense strategy. But the decisive move that broke the crisis came on January 11, 2026. Footage from Shiraz documents how a nation's logistics were brought to a sudden halt. Approximately 2 million drivers turned off their engines and physically halted life across Iran. Drivers used their vehicles as barricades, defying the regime with revolutionary slogans. They completely broke through the wall of fear that had held them back for decades. This was not a strike for wages. It was solidarity with a national revolution. The regime's security protocols were caught completely unprepared for this level of coordination. This spark in Shiraz turned into an uncontrollable forest fire within just hours. The epicenter of the crisis quickly spread north to the critical city of Isfahan. Isfahan is not only a cultural center but the military and industrial heart. Uranium enrichment facilities and steel factories are concentrated in this vital region. The scale of this logistical paralysis became clear when it reached Tehran's gates. Reports state that not a single commercial truck was seen for miles around the capital. Tehran is now under a de facto siege caused by the breakdown of supply chains. The city of 15 million has plunged into a severe food and fuel crisis. Supermarket shelves are emptying rapidly, and flour shipments are simply not happening. Bakeries cannot produce bread, and the people are beginning to feel the hunger. It is mathematically impossible to feed 88 million people using only military logistics. One of the most dangerous aspects of the crisis is unfolding in the city of Tabriz. Tabriz is an industrial capital where ethnic tensions are already historically high. Approximately 1 million workers have joined the strike here, a truly enormous figure. Workers have effectively taken hostage the factories in protest against the regime's policies. Production lines have stopped and raw material supplies have been completely cut off. The parts manufacturers, the heart of Iran's automotive industry, are completely shut down. Soldiers entering the factories cannot find workers to operate the complex machine. You can force a soldier to stand guard, but he cannot produce precision parts. This situation has wiped out the supply of goods in Iran's domestic market. Cars cannot be manufactured, and agricultural machinery cannot be repaired anywhere in Iran. This is a supply shock, the biggest trigger of unstoppable hyperinflation. However, the real disaster is unfolding at Bandar Abbas, Iran's gateway to the world. If a country's ports stop, that country cannot breathe, and Bandar Abbas is dead. The situation here has gone beyond a strike and turned into a total port occupation. Over 500,000 port workers going on strike has blown up Iran's sea bridges. This port handles 70% of non-oil exports, and that percentage is now zero. This is the main gateway for food and medicine, and it is currently locked. Ships waiting in the open cannot unload cargo, and goods are rotting in warehouses. Footage shows port workers resisting regime forces and seizing administration buildings. The regime stationed soldiers, but without crane operators, those containers will not move. Port workers effectively have a gun to the regime's head and are ready to fire. Another deadly aspect is unfolding in the energy heartland of Ahvaz and Khuzestan. The regime's heart and blood is oil, and that blood has stopped flowing. If oil stops, the militia cannot be paid, and operations in Syria cannot continue. Oil workers did not just slow down production. They physically shut off the valves. These strikes reduced Iran's oil production by 40%, a catastrophic loss for the state. The daily loss exceeds $150 million, bleeding the regime dry every single hour. 160 million barrels of oil are waiting in tankers, unable to be sold or moved. This means the regime is out of foreign currency and hyperinflation will explode. By shutting off the valves, the workers have cut the regime's financial lifeline. Iran has transformed from an oil superpower into an oil-poor chaos overnight. So, how do these local strikes affect the global equation for Iran's allies? China and Russia had built their strategy on Iran's stability, but that is gone. Trade data shows the regime has collapsed internationally, and allies are fleeing. Trade with China experienced a sharp, devastating decline of over 25% recently. China cannot obtain oil from Iran, nor can it send goods to the country. Chinese companies are pragmatic. They see Iran is now an uninvestable war zone. Beijing now views Iran not as an ally, but as a heavy strategic burden. The situation on the Russian front is even more dire for the regime. Putin hoped to use Iran to bypass sanctions, but that door is now closed. Trade with Russia has shrunk by 20% because Iranian railways are on strike. Russia cannot sell grain or obtain military parts through a paralyzed Iran. The uprising of millions of workers has burst the bubble of that partnership. Russia is abandoning Iran, leaving the regime isolated on the world stage. Desperate, the regime has pressed the panic button and turned on its own people, unable to trust its army. They have imported foreign mercenaries from Iraq. 5,000 militiamen have been deployed to kill protesting citizens in the streets. This is a state using a foreign army against its own people to survive. This is the greatest proof that legitimacy has ended and the state has collapsed. Over 2,000 people have been killed, but violence is not breaking the strikes. They try to hide crimes with internet blackouts, but the images still leak out. Thanks to Starlink, the world is watching the regime crumble in real time. What is happening is not a simple crisis. It is a total state collapse. From the machinist in Tabriz to the crane operator in Bandar Abbas, it is over 6 million people have pulled the plug, and the regime is fading into darkness. No matter how strong a state is, it dies without the flow of goods. The regime has tanks, but the tanker drivers are on strike. Those tanks are now just useless piles of metal without fuel to run them. The Iranian people are rewriting their destiny with their blood and their sweat. The regime is drowning in the silence of a logistical suicide, and at the end of that darkness, the dawn of a new Iran is breaking.